Taylor Hayes entered the grand ballroom of the Forrester estate on that fateful afternoon, her palms pressed tight against the satin folds of her gown and her breath caught fast in her throat as every eye in the cavernous room turned toward her. Just moments before, the assembled family. Eric seated at the head table like an imperious king surveying his court, Ridge standing tall beside him in his impeccably tailored suit, Brooke Logan radiant in pearls and whisper-soft silk, Thomas and Phoebe chattering to the side, Eric's sisters. Felicia and Anne exchanged speculative glances, and even the usually reserved Steffi and Liam lingered at the entrance in muted conversation, had been basking in the glow of what was assumed to be Ridge's triumphant return to the fold. Rumors had swirled for days that Ridge and Brooke were finally rekindling their epic romance, that perhaps the prodigal son had chosen his first and greatest love at last. Instead, Taylor Hayes halted on the marble floor, lifted her chin, and let a hush descend like a velvet curtain across the glittering room. Without a stammer, without a quiver in her voice, she announced to the breathless audience, "I'm engaged to Ridge. He has asked me to marry him, and I have said yes." A stunned silence rippled outward, sharp as shattered glass, and Brooke's lips parted in horror, her pearl necklace twisting as she placed trembling hands to her throat. Ridge's smile flickered, part pride, part astonishment, before he stepped forward, closed the gap between them, and slipped his hand into Taylor's as though the two of them shared a secret language in that single, electric touch. The world tilted on its axis as the Forrester Empire fashion dynasty, family dynasty, watched in shock as the final chapter of the most storied love triangle in Los Angeles history was penned in a single stroke of audacity. No sooner had the words left Taylor's lips than Eric rose from his chair, his silver hair catching the chandelier's light like a halo. His steel-blue gaze searched Ridge's face for an answer, and though pride and astonishment warred in his expression, he found himself beaming at the sight of his son clasping Taylor's hand. He cleared his throat, lifted a crystal flute of champagne from a nearby server's tray, and declared in measured tones, "To Ridge and Taylor, may your union be as strong as the pillars of this house." Glasses chimed, but beneath the chorus, Wolf's legendary score to the Forrester fashion shows had played in the foyer all afternoon and now seemed to mock the abrupt shift in alliances. Brooke Logan felt the warmth drain from her cheeks as the champagne flute in her hand trembled, threatening to spill golden flecks like tears down the front of her dress. She had believed, with every fiber of her being, that Ridge's heart belonged to her alone, that their history, thousands of moments woven together from high-stakes corporate battles to stolen kisses beneath Riviera sunsets, would always draw them back to one another. Yet here he stood, smiling at Taylor, a woman he had once loved with the intensity of a summer wildfire, a woman he had left behind in the wake of passion and regret. And now he had returned not to Brooke, but to Taylor, offering her a ring and, with it, a future that erased the promise of hope Brooke had carried in her heart for so long. In that instant, the family fractured into camps of disbelief and whispered speculation. Felicia Forbes nudged Thomas, her eyes wide as she whispered, "Can you believe it? Ridge engaged to Taylor. He's never done something so unexpected." Thomas, ever the schemer, allowed a sly grin to cross his lips and replied, "It's the Forrester way. Never let a pattern go unbroken." But this is bold, even for them. Meanwhile, Steffi Spencer's gaze darted between Brooke's stricken face and Liam's frowning concern, her own history of rivalry with Taylor coloring every thought. She remembered how Taylor's quick return to Ridge had once shattered her own dreams of a future draped in Forrester elegance. Now she watched as Brooke's world crumbled beneath her designer heels, and although she loathed to admit it, a pang of sympathy pierced her heart. Liam placed a reassuring hand on Steffi's arm but spoke only to himself, his voice low. "Poor Brooke. She's been through so much. Will she ever catch her breath?" Meanwhile, Ridge's half-brother Nick Marone, who had been lingering in the shadows of the room's periphery, clasped his jaw, the bitter tang of betrayal turning his features cold. He had staked everything on winning Brooke's loyalty, his family claims, his ruthless boardroom maneuvers, and found himself blindsided by this whirlwind engagement. Recognizing in Ridge's ring on Taylor's finger the bitter truth that power and love could outmaneuver even the most determined plans. Brooke, cutting a solitary figure atop the staircase, felt as though the air itself had been stolen from her lungs. The soft click of Ridge's heels on the marble as he approached Taylor sent an ache through her chest. Ridge knelt beside Taylor, slipping a ring onto her slender finger, and Taylor allowed a single tear of joy to slide down her cheek. Ridge looked up at her, shining with the clarity of purpose Brooke had once craved, and whispered words Taylor returned with a soft yes that echoed in Brooke's mind like an executioner's gavel. For Brooke, the world blurred. Images of past reunions with Ridge, passionate embraces in Forrester's couture salons, whispered confessions beneath the Italian groves, all now felt like relics of an untrue idol. It was as though Ridge had page-flipped from their love story to a new chapter that didn't include her name. She placed a hand against the polished railing, her knuckles whitening with the force of her grip, and could only think, after everything we've been through, after all the promises, he chooses her. And in that moment, Brooke felt the irrevocable shift of destiny's wheel, tilting toward a future she no longer inhabited. Taylor, radiant beneath the cascade of astonished stares, rose to her feet and allowed Ridge to guide her down the steps where Brooke had once stood, the space between them now occupied by an unspoken yet irrevocable truth. Taylor was Ridge's future. Ridge extended his hand to Brooke, an offer of empathy, but she shook herself free with a soft, bitter laugh and turned her head away. "Congratulations," she managed, her voice catching like a sword through Ridge's heart. He reached out, his expression pained as though the knife of Brooke's rejection carved deeper than any blow. But Taylor pressed closer, her body forming a protective shield between Ridge's past and future, and whispered, "Thank you, Brooke. This means everything to me." Brooke's shoulders slumped as she watched them, the two figures embracing as though nothing could break their bond. Behind them, the Forrester family erupted into controlled applause, some faces bright with genuine happiness for Taylor, others etched with mortified dismay at the seismic change in the family dynamic. Eric lifted his eyes to the domed ceiling as if beseeching heaven for strength, while Felicia hovered near Brooke, murmuring sympathetic condolences that floated unheard into Brooke's numbed mind. Ridge and Taylor's engagement announcement sent shockwaves far beyond the ballroom. Text messages buzzed from cell phones in silent pockets, social media lit up with speculation, fashion magazines would call it the scoop of the decade, television talk shows would dissect each nuance of Brooke's distress, and rival houses would salivate at the potential vulnerability of Forrester Creations now that its head designer's loyalties lay so publicly with Taylor. In the quiet aftermath of champagne flutes clinking, Jackson Forrester, Ridge's nephew, sidled up to his father Thomas and whispered, "Do you think Brooke will resign from the company? She can't bear to see Taylor at Ridge's side every morning." Thomas shrugged, eyes alight with the thrill of scheming futures. "Brooke's a survivor. She'll find a way to strike back, perhaps with her own fashion line or a new romance that shifts the balance of power once again." But deep in her private chambers, Brooke Logan pressed trembling fingers to her phone, dialed her sister Katie, and wept into the receiver. "He's chosen her, Katie. Ridge has chosen Taylor over me, and I don't know how to move forward from here." Katie's comforting voice offered the first seeds of consolation, but Brooke knew that her path forward must be defined by more than tears. It must be shaped by the resilience that had returned her to Ridge's arms before and would, she vowed, lead her to a destiny beyond his newest vow. At day's end, in the hushed corridors of Forrester Creations, Whispers of loyalty and doubt intertwined with the rustle of fabric swatches and the hum of sewing machines. The designers gathered to discuss upcoming couture lines, but all their minds were elsewhere, on Taylor's sudden engagement, on Brooke's heartbreak, on Ridge's motivations. Was this engagement a true act of love or a turbulent maneuver born of guilt and late-blooming regret? Would Brooke's presence haunt every fitting until Taylor's ring sparkled on Ridge's finger as a reminder that her chance was gone? And what if Taylor herself, though radiant in the glow of Ridge's devotion, would she withstand the onslaught of scrutiny from a family and a public that never truly forgave a woman who dared to stand between Logan and Forrester hearts? In the hushed sanctum of his office, Ridge closed the door, removed his tie, and stared at the engagement ring he'd placed on Taylor's hand. Its facets caught the lamplight, reflecting a future both dazzling and daunting. He sank into his leather chair and exhaled a breath heavy with the weight of his choice. Behind him, the portrait of his late mother gazed down as though judging his heart. Had he done the right thing? Could he truly forge a new chapter of love without longing for the one he left behind? And would Taylor's hand in his be a balm for his restless soul, or a reminder of all he had sacrificed when he whispered yes to a bride he had only just remembered how to love? Thus the Forrester saga turned a new irrevocable page. Taylor and Ridge's engagement, announced with calm resolve and received with stunned silence, closed the legendary triangle that had bound Brooke and Ridge in a dance of passion and pain for decades. The Forrester mansion, once a sanctuary of glamour and glitter, now rang with the echoes of a love ended and a love reborn, each heartbeat in its halls a testament to the mercurial nature of the human heart. And as Brooke Logan retreated into her own self-imposed exile, and Taylor Hayes allowed herself to bask in the promise of a future she had once thought lost, the question on everyone's lips remained the same. When Ridge slips the ring upon Taylor's finger in those hushed moments after the party ends, will he feel the full weight of his decision, or will he look across the room, see Brooke's absence, and wonder if the final turn in their love story has truly found its happily ever after? Eric Forrester's voice carried through the gilded halls of his Newport estate like a summons from Olympus itself, so when he issued invitations for an impromptu gathering that evening, every member of the Forrester clan sensed that something momentous was afoot. The sprawling gardens, lit by hundreds of lanterns hanging from ancient olive trees and accentuated by tables heaped with fine china and crystal flutes glinting in the lamplight, felt more like a courtroom than a celebration as guests arrived in their finest. Ridge Forrester, fresh from announcing his engagement to Taylor Hayes, entered the courtyard shoulder to shoulder with his fiancée, his tailored suit pressed and composed, but with tension visible in the tight set of his jaw. Brooke Logan floated between the guests, her silk gown whispering secrets of betrayal, while Nick Marone lingered near a buffet table, feigning interest in filet mignon, but clearly sizing up every Forrester heir and heiress who passed within earshot. As the assembled family and close collaborators, Thomas, Felicia, Steffi, Liam, Eric Jr., and even long-absent Donna speaking quietly with Katie, murmured over champagne and canapes, Eric took the makeshift dais at the foot of the grand fountain, his silver hair gleaming under the moonlit sky. His smile was reserved, but carried the weight of decades building the Forrester legacy. "My family," he began, raising his glass deliberately. "Tonight I ask you to celebrate what makes this house strong: honor, honesty, and the bonds of love forged through trial. But I also call upon you to remember what we owe each other as Forresters." A hush fell as Eric's gaze settled on Ridge, Taylor at his side, a silent plea for attention. Ridge straightened, chest taut. Eric continued, voice firm, "Ridge, my son, you have always followed your heart. But before you bind your future to that heart, I urge you to remember the woman who has stood by you through storm after storm, the woman whose name is entwined with everything this family has ever built, Brooke Logan." A collective intake of breath rippled across the courtyard. Ridge's smile flickered and died. "Dad," Ridge began, voice low, "this isn't about Brooke. Taylor is the woman I see my life with." Eric's eyes narrowed, unwavering. "Taylor is fine, and we cherish her, but you and Brooke have history, a history of passion and resilience. You cannot so easily discard that." The fire in Ridge's gaze met his father's steel. "Dad, with respect, you will stand down. My heart has chosen, and you will honor that." Murmurs rose among the guests as Eric's proud facade cracked. He stepped closer to his son, closing a distance that no one dared intervene. "You owe her more than a courtesy, Ridge. You owe her truth." Ridge's jaw clenched. Even Taylor's hand on his arm trembled with uncertainty. "My truth is mine to tell," he shot back. Eric's hand came down upon the marble balustrade, rattling glasses. "Then tell it fully." Ridge's fist clenched at his side, knuckles white. "This is my life, my choice. You have no right to judge my happiness." "I am your father," Eric thundered, voice echoing off the estate walls. "And it is my right and duty to judge what will harm you." The challenge crackled between them like lightning. Ridge, voice trembling with emotion, spat, "Then you will no longer have my silence, nor my respect, if you continue to meddle." Taylor gasped, and Ridge turned on his heel, stalking away from his father, leaving Eric staring after him, grief and fury warring in his eyes as the assembled Forrester dynasty looked on in stunned silence. Meanwhile, on the fringe of this domestic battlefield, Brooke watched with a calculated calm as Ridge walked off into the blossoming night. Each step he took reverberated in her heart like the tolling of a bell signaling a final farewell. She felt a cold betrayal seep into her bones and realized she could not stand idly by as Ridge slipped further into Taylor's embrace. Brooke's gaze slid to Nick Marone, whose own vendetta against the Forresters, fueled by bitterness over his ex-wife and the Logan legacy, mirrored her own pain. Sliding through the crowd with the elegance of a strategist, Brooke whispered into Nick's ear the barest hint of what she knew. The confidential Forrester Creations design schematics, the upcoming board votes, the pending supply contracts, all P and L figures and trade secrets she had come to learn in her years as Ridge's confidant. Nick's eyes gleamed with opportunity. Together, they formed a pact of vengeance. Brooke would provide insider intelligence, emails from Eric's private server, details of Ridge's new collection launch, the names of key stakeholders. To cripple Taylor's favor in the company's highest circles, while Nick would unleash the information through whispered leaks to high-powered fashion journalists, stock market analysts, and rival houses. Over the next hours, as Ridge isolated himself in his private wing to lick the wounds of his feud with Eric, Brooke and Nick slipped into Forrester Creations' secure network, exporting dossiers on Taylor's designs just days from the runway, revealing that a critical silk shipment had been diverted, an echo of Nick's earlier sabotage and implying Taylor's involvement. Nick forwarded the data to a prominent New York fashion blog, accompanied by an anonymous tip suggesting that Taylor's engagement might be nothing more than a ploy to usurp Brooke's influence over Ridge and the company. The article went live at dawn, headlined "Forrester's Next Big Scandal, Taylor's Designs or a Family Conspiracy?" Stocks dipped, gossip columns lit up, and the Forrester boardroom awoke to whispers of betrayal. From her estate across town, Brooke watched the fallout with a grim satisfaction, as Ridge's phone lit up with frantic calls from investors and colleagues questioning his judgment. When Ridge finally emerged from his seclusion, he found Taylor in his design studio, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with tears as she clutched printed emails detailing her alleged deceit. Ridge felt the walls of his world collapse. His father's disapproval, his fiancée's humiliation, and the realization that Brooke had wielded the intimate knowledge of his lineage as a weapon to divide his heart and destroy his future. Amid the debris of scandal and shattered loyalties, one truth remained unassailable. The flames of betrayal had been ignited, and no Forrester or Logan would ever be the same.